Hey, it's NPR's Book of the Day. I'm Andrew Limbong. To think big picture about a problem takes a lot of effort. People who do it are usually trying to fix a problem that's been fomenting for years and trying to change the minds of people who can't see any other option. In a bit, we'll hear about a woman changing the thinking behind dog rescue and really shining a light on who exactly the situation as it stands now helps and who does it hurt. But first, Carlos Moreno has been thinking big picture about cities and city planning for years. And he had this idea of the 15-minute city, that everything you need should be a short walk away. This thinking could decrease our dependence on cars and help ease the impacts of global warming. Extremists and conspiracy theorists jumped on this guy, attacking him for being some sort of evil totalitarian presence looking to control the freedom of people's movement. But that hasn't stopped him from promoting his big idea. He's got a book out called The 15-Minute City, and he talked to Here Now's Scott Tong about what his philosophy actually entails. That's coming up.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Sony Pictures Classics, presenting Between the Temples, a new comedy starring Jason Schwartzman as a cantor losing his voice and possibly his faith, whose world is upended when his grade school music teacher, played by Carol Kane, becomes his new bat mitzvah student. IndieWire raves that Between the Temples is spiky, hilarious, and thoroughly unorthodox. Variety calls it raucous and tender. Between the Temples is now playing only in theaters.
If you live in or near a city, how long is your commute? How close is the nearest school, supermarket, park, doctor's office? Well, our next guest argues you should be able to get to all those places in 15 minutes, on foot, by bike, or public transit. Carlos Moreno coined the concept of the 15-minute city. It's also the name of his new book. It has examples of cities moving in this direction. The idea is getting traction in some circles. It's also the target of conspiracy theorists. So let's talk about it with Carlos Moreno, who joins us now. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for this kind invitation. Greetings from Paris today.
Nice to talk to you. So can you briefly sum up the idea of the 15-minute city? If you take a big, sprawling city in the U.S. or around the world, spaghetti freeways and long distances, what is your vision of what they should become?
Yeah, thank you. My proposal for developing this new lifestyle is to provide more local services within a short perimeter, to have a more local, vibrant economy, more local employments, more schools, medical services, to improve the quality of life.
So do you mean all of these local services, schools, services, supermarkets, all within a 15-minute walk? Is that the idea?
Yes, within a short perimeter. The number of minutes is not important. 10, okay. 15, 18. The important is to have a more distributed city, to rebalance, to develop more green areas. This is a question of the urban health.
Urban health.
Yes.
I understand. So tell us how we got to this place that you argue is problematic. A lot of Americans certainly celebrate the automobile, which of course came in the early 20th century, and it became central to American life after World War II. How did these cities develop, as you argue, in this problematic way?
Yes, in the American way, of course, we have this a strong car dependency. However, we have, for example, today in the USA, cities as Portland in the Oregon State, Cleveland in the Ohio, Seattle as well, that have started these radical transformations for offering this better quality of life, to create this decentralized life, to cut with this car dependency in these complicated times with climate change, global warming is present. We need to transform a generational attitude.
I guess the question is, at least in the United States, I'm trying to imagine how would this change? There are people who are 2 generations in used to the sprawling suburban life, they believe that they enjoy that life. There are property developers that want to provide that same life. There are so many interests, economic interests and individual interests to keep things exactly the way they are now. How does it really change?
This is a long journey, but in reality, we don't have a choice because the impact of global warming, we need to relocalize more economical activity, localizes more educational activities to break with the isolation of the individual home. This behavior has as well a very important cost for offering services when we need a cultural change, climate, and in particular, urban health.
Yeah. You're advocating for more neighborhoods to reduce people's isolation and to live in closer proximity and what you call these decentralized cities. You have become subjected to some conspiracy theories by those on the right, even death threats last year after a group of mayors embraced this idea. So people put out lies about you being involved in some global conspiracy, as they put it, to control people's movements on behalf of a supposed totalitarian world government. We should say, these are not true, but is the harassment you're facing still happening?
Yes, unfortunately, we have been living in very hard times, but this harassment is in reality related to the resistance for changing the use of an individual car. I was and I am still now the target of these conspiracy mongers, but they consider that my proposal of 15-minute city is a way for creating a new climate lockdown. In fact, this is not my theory. It is enough to read my books, to visit the different cities that have implemented this model.
Yeah.
We have developed a humanistic model for living in the better conditions based on this happy proximity.
Carlos Moreno is the author of the new book, The 15-Minute City, A Solution to Saving Our Time and Our Planet. Carlos Moreno, thanks very much.
Thank you so much for the kind invitation. Great pleasure.
This message comes from NPR sponsor IBM. Things will go wrong for your customers, but your business can make it right with Watson X Assistant. AI that can help resolve problems by understanding your customer requests with 90% accuracy. Let's create customer service in service of customers with Watson X Assistant. Learn more at ibm.com/assistant. IBM, let's create. Support for NPR and the following message come from the Wallace Foundation, working to develop and share practices that can improve learning and enrichment for young people and the vitality of the arts for everyone. Ideas and information at wallacefoundation.org.
The problem Lori Weise has been trying to think big picture about is dog rescue, and how there is a direct relationship between animals who need shelter and help and, well, people who need shelter and help. And her big idea was that you can't address the former without addressing the latter. Author Carol Mithers has written a book about her titled Rethinking Dog Rescue, Dog Lady and the Story of America's Forgotten People and Pets. And here she is, talking to Here Now's Peter O'Dowd.
You've probably seen those ads for animal rescue that tug at your heartstrings. They show dogs and cats, all skin and bones, shivering in the cold or baking in the heat. The ads scream out, "Help us save these poor, sad animals." But some advocates are asking a provocative question. What if we're preventing animal cruelty in the wrong way? What if we tried to help the people who owned those animals instead of trying to take them away? That's the life mission of a woman profiled in a new book called Rethinking Rescue. And the author, Carol Mithers, joins me now from Los Angeles. Carol, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
The heart of your story is about Lori Weise. People call her the dog lady. Tell us about Lori and how she got into this work of rescuing animals in downtown LA.
Lori was working for a furniture company in downtown Los Angeles in the 90s, and she and her coworker, Richard Tuttlemondo, saw a lot of stray dogs living on the sidewalks. and felt very badly about their condition. And as the two of them started to help the dogs, they began to realize that these were not strays. They belonged to unhoused people who lived in the city. And she started trying to help those people care for their animals. I think it would have been easier, in a sense, to talk about taking those dogs away from their people because they were living in pretty terrible conditions in some cases. But she understood that the people who were living on the streets loved their animals, and in many cases, the animals loved them back. And the point then wasn't to take them away, but to help the owners do a better job caring for them.
We're going to get to that part of her job and her work and her mission, but first, just describe what kind of conditions Lori was up against. I mean, as you say, it was not only very difficult for the animals, but also for the people.
Yes, and a lot of the people suffered from untreated mental illnesses. Some of them were former foster kids who had aged out and had no safety net. Some of them were drug users. And the conditions in and around Skid Row in Los Angeles have been terrible for decades and still are. People were living on the sidewalks. There were some places to get food, but there was really no assistance of any kind other than the missions that would help people get a meal, sometimes get a bed for the night.
Right. So Lori founds an organization called Downtown Dog Rescue, or DDR. She doesn't want to remove the dogs from people's lives. She wants to help people keep their pets, which sounds simple, Carol, but it was groundbreaking, wasn't it?
It was, because, let me backtrack briefly to say that she does not aim to keep dogs with people who are mistreating them. It was always people who loved their animals but did not have the ability to be good dog owners. So you were dealing with people who had sometimes a very iffy connection with reality. You had to earn trust from people who were used to rescuers trying to take their animals away. So a lot of what she had to do in the early days was to tell those people that she was trying to help. I'm not the dog catcher. I'm not here to take your animal.
And by the way, those people she was trying to help, they desperately loved their animals as much as anyone else.
Maybe even more, because if you think about it, if you're on the street, you don't have a whole lot of people who will talk to you, who will deal with you, much less love you. These were bonded pairs. They were families.
To this point, I want to play something that I think will resonate with you. This is the well-known Sarah McLachlan ad that made $30 million for the ASPCA in 2007. Let's listen to some of that.
In the arms of the angel, may you find some comfort here.
Hi, I'm Sarah McLachlan. Will you be an angel for a helpless animal? Every day, innocent animals are abused, beaten, and neglected, and they're crying out for help.
When you hear that ad, what do you hear? Because I get the sense that this is the opposite kind of work that Lori Weise was doing.
It is. From the earliest days of the humane movement that we sometimes call no-kill or rescue, the emphasis has been on animal suffering. Animals are suffering and we need to help them, which oftentimes means moving them into new and better or more affluent homes. And there was a reason for that, because there was a lot of killing going on in shelters in the early days. And so evoking sympathy was very helpful. But it didn't, that image of unwanted animals, unhoused animals, did not take into consideration that a certain percentage of animals that were in the shelter, on the street, were actually owned and loved, and that it made more sense to help the people who are with them do a better job than to simply say this animal is suffering, let's take it away.
How exactly would she help people keep their animals?
Well, in the early days, it was paying for spay and neuter, offering food, vaccinations, information sometimes, because not everyone was willing to sterilize a dog without understanding that there were benefits beyond not having puppies. Later on, when she moved her operations to South Los Angeles and was dealing with a population of working people who simply didn't have money, it was something much larger. There were community clinics that offered vaccinations, flea treatments, microchips, collars, leashes, food, and again, spay and neuter, because no one she helps long-term can get her help unless they agree to spay and neuter. She also stationed, and this was the most groundbreaking thing back in its day, in 2013, she paid a counselor to stand at the South LA shelter and try to interrupt people who are seeking to turn in their animals, to ask them, why are you giving up this animal? Is there something we can do to change that situation?
So if someone in that situation said, my landlord won't let me keep the dog, I have to get rid of it, what would they do?
In later days, she made a partnership with a housing rights attorney, and the housing rights attorney, Gratis, would step in to see if there was some way that the landlord could be persuaded or if there was some legal way that the dog could remain in the home.
You say in the book that Americans love poor pets, but they don't love poor people, and that when economic times are difficult for humans, the situation gets really much, much tougher for animals, which is one of the reasons why COVID was so hard on animal shelters. How should we grapple with that problem?
It requires some money, and so far we seem not to be willing to spend it that way. The cost of vet care, as any dog owner knows, is just insane right now. And so when you have someone who's a minimum wage worker or a low-wage worker, asking them to take their pet to the vet and take on sometimes $1,000, $2,000 in debt is really asking a lot of people. And yet there seems to be very little attention paid to how we can fund some system that would be more humane.
And that's making Lori's work all the more urgent for people who can't afford it. And I want to step back for a moment here and just ask you about her personal history, which involves trauma and abuse. And I noticed that many of the people that she works with in this field also have struggled with those issues. Is there a connection? Do you think that there is something that drives folks like Lori to dedicate their lives to animals in this way?
I do, and I think it's empathy and understanding that maybe we are not all that different. In her case, it's also a great desire to relieve suffering because she has suffered and she sees people suffering, she sees animals suffering, and it actually, we all see it, but we're able to turn away and go about our lives, and she's not.
So anyone who reads it might be wondering how in the world Lori was able to keep it up. Not only was it expensive, it was emotionally exhausting. I mean, what did she tell you about that? And what gave her hope about continuing against a sea of animals that needed help?
Therapy, for one, and a belief that she was doing the right thing, and switching out her work as necessary. I mean, she's always looking for new ways to do things. And right now, she has got herself a mobile veterinary truck, that she is going to take into neighborhoods and deal with people and help people who have no other access to a vet. That's not to say she doesn't get depressed and overwhelmed, because she does. But she said she works for a furniture company, and she said to me at one point, I was put on earth to do something, and it's not making furniture. So this is her mission. This is what she does.
Carol Mithers' new book is Rethinking Rescue, Dog Lady and the Story of America's Forgotten People and Pets. Carol, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's it for this week on NPR's Book of the Day. If you want more, you can sign up for our newsletter at npr.org/newsletter/books. I'm Andrew Limbong. The podcast is produced by Isabella Gomez-Sarmiento and edited by Megan Sullivan. Our founding editor is Petra Mayer. The show elements for this week were produced and edited by Andrew Craig, Matthew Sherman, Todd Munt, Emiko Tamagawa, Samantha Raffleson, Michael Scotto, Melissa Gray, Michael Radcliffe, Chris Bentley, and Mark Navin. Beth Donovan is our managing editor. Thanks for listening.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Vuori, a new perspective on performance apparel. Clothing designed with premium fabrics, built to move in, styled for life. For 20% off your first purchase, go to vuori.com/NPR. This message comes from NPR sponsor Rosetta Stone, an expert in language learning for 30 years. Right now, NPR listeners can get Rosetta Stone's lifetime membership to 25 different languages for 50% off. Learn more at rosettastone.com/NPR.